morning, YouTube land. Experimenting with some new camera equipment today, which is quite exciting. I'm trying to get my, you might have guessed, I've kind of committed to trying to produce more stuff, and I'm trying to get my workflow for this sort of filming and the editing as painless as possible. So I've got a few little mounts and bits and pieces that I'm trying out. Anyway, today's video is about a XT1200Z Super Tenere, so big traily bike, twin cylinder Yamaha thingy bob. It's, what to say about it, so it's a 2010, so it's one of the first ones. I went out to it last week. It's a long-winded story that I'm not going to bother you with, but the upshot of the long story is it won't start anymore. Went out to it, appears to have virtually no compression, like 25 psi. So I thought this would be a good one to share with you. I'll show you compression testing, like out in the wild, and probably cylinder leak testing as well. Looked the spec up, interestingly, this would be interesting for you. I looked the spec up for what the compression should be, and it says, I'll show it on the screen, it was 90 something psi at 250 rpm, basically cranking speed, which is super low for an engine. Anything, the sort of rule of thumb really is anything that's not 3 figures is broken. However, there are some quirks with doing this sort of work. Some big 4-stroke engines have things called decompressors, which basically bleed off some of the compression pressure as the engine's cranking, and it's to give the starter motor an easier time. So they're just enough compression to allow them to fire, and once they fire, the decompressor switches off and you get full engine compression. And the way it works on these is and it's similar on most big 4-strokes, there's a little mechanism that holds open one of the exhaust valves as it's cranking, so you don't get full compression. And the way that works is there's 2 little weights that fly out with centrifugal force as soon as the engine fires. What I'm thinking I might need to do with this one is to take the cam cover off and disable the decompressor, so we can get I'm worried that maybe something's going wrong with the decompressor. Maybe the valve clearances have been done incorrectly and it's having an effect or something. Anyway, so we're going to go and excuse me, we're going to go and have a look at this Super Tenere, and it's miles away as well. It's a place called Malvern, which is, what is it, I don't know, 50 miles from me probably. I think there might need to be a coffee stop on the way. Anyway, I can oh, and the weather's crap as well, so look what I can do with my new doofy gadget. Doofer, look. Doesn't hit the windscreen. Look at that weather. Rubbish. And will it come back on me? Look at that. I love it. Right, anyway, see you at the job. Here she is then, guys. So my plan of attack is, I think I mentioned this before, I'm going to pull the cam cover, have a look at this decompression mechanism. It's going to be a bit of a mission to get in there, I think, and get that cam cover off. Apparently it comes out this way though, so throttle bodies are going to have to come off by the looks of it. Yeah, definitely throttle bodies off. Yeah, it'll be a fight. Get the throttle bodies out of the way, it's going to come out underneath this frame. So I'm going to get the cam cover off, I'm going to check this mechanism for the decompressor. And then we'll get that far, and then we'll probably end up doing a sort of bypass the mechanism. You can do it with a cable tie sometimes, hold the weights open so the decompressor isn't working anymore, and do a compression test without the decompressor. Have a look at the valve clearances, that sort of stuff. Let me just, I'll get my compression gauge out of the van and I'll just show you how much compression it's got at the moment. That's probably an interesting thing to do first. Another thing worth noting probably is when I first came out to it, when I cranked it, you could kind of tell something wasn't quite right. You have a listen to this. I don't know whether it's going to come out on camera. just doesn't, I can't quite put my finger on why, it just doesn't sound right cranking. Anyway, compression test. And interestingly, if you can see down in there, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 spark plugs. So big engines like this is a 1200cc parallel twin, so it's 600cc per cylinder, and you find this with big single cylinder 4-strokes. It's got 2 plugs per cylinder. You just get an evener burn, if that makes sense. So the ignition of the fuel is much evener. Is that a evener? That's not a word, is it? It's much more even, the burn of the fuel, when you've got 2 plugs per cylinder, when it's a large diameter cylinder. Anyway, so compression test. Right, so we've got a boost pack connected, so we can do this compression test and have it crank pretty swiftly. And then, where's my gauge? So there's the gauge. I'll crank it, you have a look at that. Interestingly, focus. Interestingly, this throttle arrangement on these, and it's the same with most modern bikes, is it's kind of fly-by-wire. When you open and close the throttle, you're basically just moving although there's cables go into it, you're moving a potentiometer, and then the throttle's controlled by this servo motor excuse me, assembly here. Interestingly, this model has a mechanical close, so if the throttle ever got stuck, that's why there's cables down to the throttle bodies. You can actually, with a twist grip, physically force the throttle shut. The reason I'm telling you this is, really you want to do full throttle for a compression test, but in this instance you can't, because you can't force the throttle to be open when you're cranking it. It'll have a little bit of an effect on the reading, but not a massive effect. So anyway, so ignition on. So we're in number 2 cylinder. That's all we got. It's not very happy. Focus. Right, let's do the next cylinder. Right, so cylinder number 1. Let's get you so you can see that. What on earth is going on? Okay, that is very, very, very sick. I don't remember it being that low. What have I done? Hang on a minute. Holy moly, is that gauge even moving? See if we can just crank it and... Hang on, let's put this on a tripod. Wow, I can... This is the pipe that's in the cylinder. I can just about feel air coming out of it. Something is very, very wrong with this engine. Let's get that cam cover off and have a look. What's going on here? Need a tool. I am a tool. So 3 wires. So if we get rid of those cables now, I can just fold those back out of the way. 10mm spanner. Really interested to find out what's wrong with this. I mean, it literally has no compression on number 1. I wonder whether the head gasket's blown between the cylinders or something, possibly. Our cylinder leak test will reveal all, though, if we get to that. Right, let's get a rag to rest these on. Right, so in the interest of doing this properly, now I've got no throttle bodies on and the inlet's open, I'm going to redo the compression test just to see if it makes any difference. I'm 100% certain it won't, but it'd just be interesting to see if there's any difference in the readings. Right, what to do with the gauge? Right, there she is in number 1. Let's have a crank and see what happens. Yeah, no compression. Interestingly, just looking down in there, some of you might have been thinking, oh, is a cam chain broken or something like that. I've already been down that road and made sure the valves are opening and closing. Let me see if I can get you a shot of the valves moving so you can see that the cam chain is in one piece. That's like a super sketchy shot, and if the camera would just stay still so it stops shaking, let me crank it and you'll see the valve opening. The camshafts are going round. Pull that cover now and have a look, see what's going on. Pretty sure the head's got to come off this thing, but I still can't help myself. I don't want anything going down in there. Right, just occurred to me that I didn't ask the guy if I could actually film his bike. I've just been and asked him and it's fine. Right, so all the bolts are out of this cam cover. We're going to try and fight it out. Hopefully it will come out fairly easily. Or maybe not. Come on, you know you want to. I kind of come out and down like that. Houses.
Is that milk and sugar?
Milk and sugar, yes please.
How much sugar?
How much sugar? 1 sugar please.
Right, okay.
Right, I'm going to attempt to explain how this decompressor works. So on this exhaust cam, it's difficult to show without getting my finger in the shot focus. So there's a little, every time I move my hand into shot it goes out of focus. There's a little weight here that flies out, and then down here on the camshaft there's a little peg. Can you see that? So as I move this weight in and out, you can see that peg backing off, and what happens is at top dead centre that peg pushes down on the shim bucket and just relieves some of the compression in the cylinder. But that mechanism appears to be working okay. So the question is, why does number 1 cylinder have no compression? And the other thing I look for straight away when I pulled the cam cover off was whether or not the shim buckets will rotate. So you back the cam, get the heel of the cam lobe on the shim bucket, and just make sure you can rotate the shim bucket to make sure there's a clearance there. And in the case of the exhaust and the inlet, the shim buckets rotate, so the valves aren't what am I trying to say? The valve clearances aren't too tight, which one of the things that was bugging me slightly, that it might have been that. So cylinder leak test next. Try and show you get you a better shot of that decompressor mechanism. So see that little pin? So as it comes round to top dead centre, you'll see that little pin, and normally that exhaust valve down there should stay shut, but as that pin comes round, see how it bumps on the shim bucket and opens the shim bucket there, look. So that's a massive, what am I trying to say? The exhaust valve's open now there, and it shouldn't be, or it should be. See as it comes, so that's normal opening of the exhaust valve, and then as the cam rotates, that little peg right there just opens the shim bucket and relieves some of the compression. There you go. Hey guys, right, so that's the decompression mechanism thing working. I just had a quick look down the number 1 cylinder with a bore scope to see if I could see some sort of massive piston damage or something, given the serious lack of compression it's got, but excuse me, can't find anything wrong. So we're going to do a cylinder leak test now. So let me explain basically what that is. So what you do is you get the piston on the compression stroke. So you've got the inlet and the exhaust valve closed, and the sort of piston halfway up the compression stroke. Now it's important with this bike to make sure that the exhaust camshaft is a very noisy moped. It's important to make sure the exhaust camshaft is in a position where that little peg thing isn't holding open an exhaust valve. So we get the engine in that position, and then basically we blow compressed air into the cylinder with a special tool. I'll show you the tool in a second. And that allows us to, it gives us basically this tool you set, I'll show you now, but you set this tool to a sort of, when it's not expelling any air, so that's sort of 0, and then the amount of it, depending on how much air it leaks, it gives you a reading. And I'll show you the tool. So this is the compression gauge. This is the, I'm going to send my camera mad because it's trying to track me. So we introduce compressed air into here. Whoa, down, camera down, camera down, camera down, camera. Come on, down, camera down, camera. I'm trying to be smart, having my camera track me, and it's not really working. So you introduce compressed air here, and then this is the supply. Whether you can see the, yeah, that's better. So this is the supply pressure from the compressor, and then this is, you set this to the set position here, and then you connect this end into the cylinder, and you use the same hose that you would, what's the thing, you use the same hose that you would for normal compression testing, but because I use snap-on ones, they've got like a little valve in the end. So you remove the valve, so that's a one-way valve, so the compression gauge holds its compression, so you can read it off, so it doesn't, the gauge, there goes the valve, so it doesn't just bump up and down. So you use the normal gauge, you screw that into the cylinder, and then you connect this to it, and you read off what it's leaking. See what I mean on this scale. Anyway, let me show you, get you a better shot of this tool. Right, hopefully this is going to work. So we've got this tool, so we connect, hang on a minute, get rid of that. So we got this tool, we connect compressed air into this end. I'm going to knock the camera with me airline, like so, and there's a pressure, what's the word I'm looking for, can't think. Anyway, so you adjust this pressure regulator, that's what I'm thinking of. So you adjust this pressure regulator until, what we want is this gauge here to go all the way around to this set point. So we wind this regulator around till we get to set, like nearly there. Okay, like that. And then let me show you what happens. So if I connect the pipe to this, like this, the air is leaking out. We look at this gauge. So that, if you pay attention to where that is, that's going to be our open point, if you like. So anything below the green is the cylinder isn't holding any pressure at all. And then if I get the end of this pipe and I flock it with my finger, look, the more I restrict it, the higher up the gauge goes. I need to readjust my set point. So as this pressure drops, the set point changes. Hang on, let's what's going on? Sorry guys. Let's let some of the pressure out of here a bit. So back this off. Get some of the pressure out. Make sure we got a true set. I'll back it off a bit more. Let the pressure out. Right. This isn't a particularly expensive gauge, which is part of the problem. I did have a snap-on one, but it went Went to the big garage in the Sky a couple of years ago when I bought this one, and to be honest, it's not the best quality, but it didn't get used that often, so kind of bear with it. Right, so that's the real set. Now let's put this pipe in again. Right there, that's better. Right, so there's red lock, so that's a full leak now, and as I block this pipe up, completely block it up, we'll go back to the set point. Does that make sense? So let's put this in the cylinder now and see. We've got exhaust and inlet valves shut with the piston halfway up the bore, and we'll see where the leak's coming from. Right, so set point is set. I've got a massive, if I plug this in, got a massive leak. The engine's in a position where all 4 valves for this number 1 cylinder are shut. I can put a screwdriver on the shim bucket and rotate all 4 shim buckets, so I know the valves are theoretically closed. Hear that? So I've got leaky inlet valves. So interestingly, I don't know if you can see this, but you can visualise, hang on, let me, whoa. You can visualise the leak, spray some brake cleaner down in there. Something very wrong with this motorbike. And interestingly, if I put my hand over here, I don't know whether you're going to hear this, if I keep my hand there for a minute, hear that? So we've got leaky exhaust valves as well. I have no idea what is going on with this bike. It also sounds like I've got some hissing, and it isn't this inlet manifold. Whether it's not the next door cylinder, so that the cylinder next door, number 2, the exhaust valves are shut on that, but the inlet valves are open. So if it was leaking into that other cylinder, I've got both spark plugs in, I'd feel something on this inlet side. Anyway, I think the technical term is it's a bit dead. Not quite sure whether you're going to see this bike again, but I suspect possibly. But anyway, that's the end of this one. Hope you found it interesting, and I'll catch you on the next one.